She stepped into the grand mansion, a place glittering with chandeliers, laughter, and polished silver. To the world, it was a night of elegance, wealth, and celebration. But for her, the moment she walked through those doors, everything changed. Instead of being seen as a guest, she was treated like an outsider. Whispers followed her. Stares cut through her dignity. And then, humiliation. In front of strangers dressed in diamonds and silk, she was forced toward the kitchen sink, told to scrub the dirty dishes as though her only worth was servitude. No one knew who she truly was. No one imagined the truth about her life, her strength, or the secret that could turn the entire room upside down. This wasn't just about one woman being disrespected. It was about centuries of prejudice that still lingers in the shadows of society's most glamorous spaces. And when the truth finally came out, it left every guest in stunned silence. But before that moment arrived, she endured something unforgettable. The question is, would you have treated her any differently? Her name was Amara. To those who truly knew her, she was more than just a woman, she was a symbol of resilience, a quiet force of grace and strength. She lived her days with dignity, carrying herself in a way that spoke of both struggle and triumph. Amara wasn't born into luxury. Her life had been a journey through storms that would have broken many, yet she emerged with her spirit unshaken. Her mornings were simple. She cherished the small rituals, watering the flowers in her garden, writing thoughts in a worn leather journal, humming songs her grandmother once sang in the church. She valued peace, family, and the quiet comfort of knowing she had carved out her own space in the world. To her neighbors, she was kind, helpful, the sort of woman who always had time to check in on others. But Amara's story carried another side, one the world rarely saw. Years of prejudice had left scars invisible to the eye but heavy on the heart. She remembered the times she was followed in stores, spoken down to in offices, or doubted in rooms where her voice should have mattered. Yet, she pushed forward, never letting cruelty define her. Her husband, David, was her pillar of strength. Together, they had built a life not just of comfort but of pride. What many didn't realize was that the very mansion hosting tonight's glittering party belonged to them. It was their dream brought to life, a symbol of how far they had come despite the obstacles society placed in their path. But Amara never boasted. She didn't seek to flaunt wealth. To her, the true victory was in dignity, in knowing she had broken barriers while staying true to herself. That night, the invitations had gone out far and wide. The mansion sparkled with lights, music echoed through its halls, and luxury surrounded every guest who arrived. Expensive cars lined the driveway, men in tailored suits shook hands, and women in flowing gowns laughed over glasses of champagne. To the outside world, it looked like any other grand celebration of power and privilege. And Amara, dressed elegantly but modestly, stepped into the space she and David had created with their own hands. She should have been greeted with warmth, with respect. After all, she was the woman of the house. But the truth is, racism does not pause in the face of wealth. It does not care for status, titles, or achievements. It hides in the glances, in the whispered comments, in the subtle ways people choose to diminish another's humanity. And on this night, in her own home, surrounded by glitter and music, Amara would once again feel its sting. The guests who judged her didn't know the full story. They didn't know whose home they stood in. They didn't know that the very walls surrounding them were built by the woman they mocked. And soon, their ignorance would be exposed in the most unforgettable way. The music swelled through the grand hall, violins weaving into soft piano notes as the air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Every corner of the mansion glimmered, the chandeliers casting golden light over silk gowns and polished shoes. To the guests, it was a night to remember, a stage of power, wealth, and prestige. But beneath the shine, another story was quietly unfolding. Amara stood near the edge of the room, a soft smile gracing her lips. She carried herself with calm confidence, but her eyes revealed a gentleness that many mistook for weakness. A group of women near the staircase glanced her way, their whispers slicing through the air like knives. Their jewelry sparkled, but their expressions carried something darker, dismissal. "Who is she?" one murmured, her voice sharp with arrogance. "I don't remember seeing her name on the guest list." Another laughed lightly, tilting her glass. Probably staff. Look at her, doesn't quite fit in, does she? The words weren't spoken for Amara to hear, but she did. She always did. Years of experience had sharpened her instincts to catch the subtle tone, the sideways glance, the half-smile that meant more than it said. Still, she held her composure. That was who she was. But each whisper stoked a fire deep within, a reminder that no matter how far she and David had come, prejudice still lingered in rooms like this. As the evening continued, the guests moved about freely, exploring the grandeur of the mansion. Some admired the art, others marveled at the architecture. Yet, when their eyes met Amara's, their admiration faltered. It was as if her very presence disrupted the image of elegance they wanted to see. One moment sealed the shift. A guest, holding an empty glass, approached Amara with a smile that barely touched his lips. He extended the glass toward her and said, "Would you mind? Champagne, please." For a second, Amara froze. The request was casual, delivered with the ease of someone certain she was part of the hired help. Her heart tightened, but her voice remained steady as she replied, "I'm not staff." The man blinked, confused, before retreating with an awkward laugh. But whispers quickly followed. "Not staff," they muttered, disbelief coating the words. "Then why is she here?" It spread like smoke, unseen but suffocating. Soon, the murmurs weren't hidden, they were pointed, louder, deliberate. Who let her in? Did someone bring their maid? She's standing here like she belongs. Every phrase was a dagger dressed as curiosity. And then came the moment that would mark the night. Near the grand dining area, a pile of dirty dishes had been left on a side table after the appetizers. A woman in an emerald gown, dripping with jewels, caught sight of Amara and snapped her fingers toward the dishes. "You there," she said, her tone dripping with command. "Take care of these, will you?" For a heartbeat, the room seemed to pause. Amara's breath caught in her chest, her pulse pounding in her ears. She felt the stares of dozens of eyes pinning her in place, waiting to see if she would obey. Her throat tightened, but she didn't move. She wanted to scream, to correct them, to demand the respect she deserved in her own home. But before she could speak, another guest chimed in with a laugh. "Yes, hurry now. The table looks dreadful." The laughter spread, light and cruel, until it wrapped around her like chains. She felt her dignity being stripped away with each chuckle. Her mind raced, should she correct them? Should she announce the truth? Or should she endure, knowing the humiliation would cut deeper if she revealed herself too soon? Finally, as if compelled by the weight of their eyes, Amara stepped forward. She lifted the plates carefully, her hands steady though her heart trembled. The guests smiled, smug in their assumption. To them, she was exactly who they thought she was, someone beneath them, someone who belonged in the kitchen. But every step she took with those dishes was heavy with rage, sorrow, and an unshakable resolve. Because she knew something they did not. The walls around them, the glittering chandeliers above them, the ground beneath their feet, it was all hers. In the kitchen, she set the plates down with a trembling hand. The sound of porcelain against marble echoed louder than the music in the hall. She pressed her palms against the counter, closing her eyes. Memories flashed, her grandmother's tired hands scrubbing floors, her mother's tears when denied a promotion, her own years of being told she didn't belong. And now, even in her triumph, the world tried to shove her back into servitude. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. This wasn't the climax, this was the storm before the storm. Back in the hall, guests congratulated one another on deals, flaunted jewels, and toasted to their imagined superiority. None suspected the truth that hovered just beyond their shallow understanding. But tension hung in the air, tightening like a rope. Because every cruel word, every demeaning glance, was being silently recorded in the hearts of those who would remember this night forever. And as Amara prepared to re-enter the room, her composure rebuilt but her resolve sharper than ever, one question burned: how much longer would she let them believe the lie? The answer would come soon enough. But for now, the party continued, unaware that the humiliation they celebrated would soon turn to shame of their own. The clinking of glasses, the swell of laughter, the music echoing through gilded halls, it all blurred into a distant hum for Amara. Her hands were wet, the faint sting of dishwater clinging to her skin as she returned from the kitchen. The humiliation had been complete. She had bent to their cruelty, not because she was weak, but because she knew the moment wasn't ready. But inside, a storm raged. Every mocking glance replayed in her mind. Every word that reduced her to a servant gnawed at her chest. And now, as she re-entered the ballroom, her eyes burned with a silent fire. She held her head high, yet her dignity felt battered, bruised. Still, no one noticed the quiet fury beneath her calm exterior. Then it happened. A group of men near the marble staircase caught sight of her. One leaned close to another, whispering loud enough for the sting to reach her ears. "Look at her, wandering around like she's a guest. Shouldn't someone tell the staff to stay out of sight?" The men chuckled, a cruel sound that seemed to echo louder than the orchestra. Another added, "Perhaps she should be more useful. The table near the fountain is a mess. Why don't you clear it, sweetheart?" The word sweetheart, dismissive, degrading, landed like a slap. Before she could react, the emerald-gowned woman who had earlier ordered her to clean dishes lifted her voice so the crowd could hear. "Excuse me, could someone show this woman where she belongs? She seems to have forgotten her place." The room stilled. Every head turned toward Amara. Dozens of eyes pierced her, stripping her of humanity, reducing her to nothing more than an object of ridicule. The silence wasn't merciful, it was suffocating, heavy, waiting for her response. Her heart hammered, each beat louder than the music that had just died in the background. For a moment, time fractured, memories colliding. She saw her grandmother's cracked hands scrubbing white floors. Her mother's trembling voice begging for respect that never came. Her own younger self, told she would never be enough, never belong. And here she was again. Even in her own home, even draped in elegance, they sought to chain her to the same cycle of humiliation. Tears threatened, but she did not let them fall. Instead, something inside her shifted, something fierce, unstoppable. She stepped forward, her heels striking the marble floor with deliberate force. The sound reverberated across the room. 1 step. 2 steps. Every movement silenced another whisper, another cruel laugh. She positioned herself in the center of the hall, beneath the chandelier that bathed her in golden light. And there she stood, straight-backed, her gaze unyielding. "You want to know who I am?" she finally said, not loud, but clear enough that her voice cut through the air like glass. The guests blinked, stunned that she had spoken. A ripple of surprise moved across their faces. She let the silence linger, let the discomfort grow. Then, slowly, she extended her hand toward the walls, the grand staircase, the chandeliers above. "This house, this mansion, it belongs to me." Gasps tore through the crowd. Glasses trembled in unsteady hands. Someone choked on their drink. The woman in emerald staggered back, her jaw slack. "And the man you've all been toasting tonight," Amara continued, her voice steady now, each word a blade of truth, "the one whose wealth and success you admire so deeply, he is my husband." The shock was complete. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. For a moment, no one breathed. The arrogance drained from their faces, replaced with confusion, disbelief, and shame. But Amara wasn't finished. She took another step forward, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "You looked at me and saw a servant. You dismissed me, mocked me, humiliated me in my own home. And why? Because of the color of my skin. Because you could not imagine that a black woman could own this. Could belong here." Her voice cracked slightly, emotion flooding through, but she held her ground. "You didn't just insult me. You insulted every ancestor who built this country with their hands, every mother who sacrificed so her children could rise, every person who has fought to be seen as equal. Tonight, you revealed not who I am, but who you are." The words hung heavy, undeniable. No orchestra could have drowned their weight. In the back of the room, David appeared, drawn by the commotion. His presence, tall, dignified, confirmed every word Amara had spoken. He moved to her side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Together, they stood as a vision of strength, unity, and triumph. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others remained frozen, caught between arrogance and guilt. But the truth could not be undone. The image of Amara, once mocked, now standing as the rightful queen of the mansion, would haunt them. Still, the silence stretched on. Amara let it. She wanted them to sit in it, to feel the weight of their prejudice, the sting of their cruelty. Finally, she asked the question that no one could answer. Tell me, when you looked at me tonight, what did you see? And when you look at me now, what do you see? No one spoke. Not a single word. And in that silence, their shame screamed louder than any apology ever could. The night ended not with applause, not with laughter, but with silence. The music never started again. The glasses, half full with champagne, remained untouched on polished tables. And the guests, who had arrived with pride and arrogance, now shifted uncomfortably in their gowns and suits, avoiding Amara's gaze. For Amara, the humiliation she endured could not be undone. The sting of being ordered to scrub dishes in her own home lingered like a scar. But in standing tall, in speaking the truth without trembling, she had turned that scar into a symbol of strength. She had refused to let their prejudice define her. David stood by her side, his hand steady on her shoulder. He didn't need to say a word, the quiet unity between them was louder than any defense he could have given. Together, they embodied resilience. And together, they reminded everyone in that room that wealth and power meant nothing without dignity and respect. Some guests, faces pale, slipped away early, too ashamed to stay. Others approached cautiously, attempting half-hearted apologies that rang hollow in the heavy air. But Amara didn't need their words. What mattered was not their excuses, it was the truth they had been forced to face. For the first time that night, the mansion didn't feel like theirs. It felt like hers. Every chandelier, every marble floor, every golden frame, it bore witness to her strength. She had reclaimed the space that ignorance had tried to strip from her. Yet the impact reached beyond the walls of that mansion. Because her story was not just hers, it was the story of countless others. How many times had people of color walked into rooms where they were doubted, dismissed, or degraded? How many times had they been asked to remember their place in a society that never offered them an equal one? This was not just a party. It was a mirror. A reflection of the quiet racism that hides in smiles, in whispers, in assumptions. The kind that doesn't always make headlines but cuts just as deeply. And if the truth was this raw in a mansion dripping with wealth, what did that say about the streets outside? About the offices, the schools, the everyday spaces where prejudice still thrived? Amara knew her voice that night was not just her own. It was her grandmother's voice, tired but unbroken. It was her mother's voice, weary but determined. It was the voice of every black woman who had ever been silenced, mocked, or overlooked, and yet continued to rise. She didn't just stand for herself. She stood for generations. And perhaps the guests didn't realize it then, but what they witnessed would follow them. They would remember her words, her gaze, her strength. They would replay the shame of their own laughter, their own whispers. Some might change. Others might not. But none would ever be able to forget. As dawn broke the next morning, light poured into the mansion through tall windows. Amara sat quietly in the garden, the same place she often found peace. The roses swayed in the breeze, the petals catching the sun. She breathed deeply, letting the stillness heal what the night had broken. Yes, the world was heavy with injustice. Yes, there would be more battles, more nights of whispered cruelty. But she knew something vital: she was not powerless. Because every act of dignity in the face of humiliation is an act of resistance. Every refusal to bow to prejudice is a step toward change. And every story like hers, told, remembered, shared, is a light piercing through the darkness. This was never just about dishes. It was never just about a party. It was about what people see when they look at someone who is different. And it was about demanding to be seen fully, truly, and equally. So, as you hear this story, ask yourself, How many more Amaras will be told to remember their place? How many more nights will prejudice masquerade as privilege? And what will you do the next time you witness it? Because silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. And change does not begin with governments or courts, it begins with people, with choices, with the courage to see injustice and say, not here. Not anymore. Amara's night ended in pain, but also in power. And the question that remains is one we cannot ignore. When the moment comes, will you stand by and watch? Or will you stand up, like she did?